I was recently asked by a viewer if he should add Canadian citizenship to his growing passport portfolio. I'm going to answer that question right now. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Here's the question that comes in. It says, "Good day. I wanted to check with you if it's possible to hold 3 citizenships from the following countries: the United States, Canada, and Israel. I currently hold U.S. and Israeli citizenships and hold a permanent resident status in Canada. I'm already eligible to file for citizenship in Canada and wanted to see if it won't interfere with my other citizenships. Can you please advise?" So, when people hear the term dual citizenship, a couple things here. Dual citizenship, people think, okay, you can have 2. Generally speaking, the way a country views it is, listen, if you're on our soil, you're our citizen. So if you're a U.S. citizen and you're in the United States and you get arrested for something, you don't get to call the Israeli embassy and say, "Come help me out." It's like, well, no, you're a U.S. citizen. You're going to deal with, as a U.S. citizen, and generally vice versa. And so what they're not saying is, you're allowed to have dual citizenship. They're saying we will not penalize you for maintaining other citizenships. And with a few rare exceptions, dual often means you can have triple, you can have 100 in some cases if the countries all agreed. And so in the case of the U.S. and Canada, they're very open to multiple citizenships. Obviously, we help people all the time who get citizenships in the Caribbean, in Turkey, who claim citizenship by descent, who move to other countries and get naturalized through golden visas or merely moving overseas. Many people we work with are U.S. and Canadian citizens, and so there's no risk to that. You may have to disclose it when you're applying for a trusted traveler program or a credit card in some cases, but really no issue with being a dual citizen. And again, I know Americans who have like 5 other citizenships, I think is the most I know of any American. And so Canada's the same way. Israel, I think, is pretty flexible. I mean, there's a few places they don't want you to go and certainly don't want you to be a citizen of, but by and large, Israel's pretty flexible. So if you're a U.S. and Israeli citizen, can you add Canada to the mix? The answer is yes. Now, would I claim a free citizenship? If you've already put the time in, then my general answer is yes, I would claim the free citizenship. And again, it's not going to be like, well, if I take Canada, I lose one of the other ones. Now, what I would ask is, number one, how long is it going to take them for you to process your application, and do you need to stay there? A lot of countries, and I'm not so much an expert on being naturalized in Canada, but I have seen like a lot of people being naturalized in Australia before Australia closed everything down a year and a half ago. And what the situation generally was is you had to be there, and I think in most countries you generally need to be there for naturalization to where you're going to continue incurring tax obligations. And so, if you're in the situation where your business is growing very quickly, or it's just at a very high level and it's just staying there, or if your crypto is going through the roof or whatever, then you have to look at the perspective of, okay, if things are slower right now, and it's going to take me 18 months to get my citizenship processed, and I've got to remain a taxpayer here until that time, what am I going to pay for that? And so I've had some people run the numbers, again, largely in Australia, where it's like, hey, the guy's Australian or the woman's Australian, and then the partner or the spouse is not, and they're looking at, should we stick around for the next year and a half? Well, our whole household is going to make $5 million in the next year and a half, $2 million in taxes. In their particular case, where it's a spouse, the spouse can probably always come back and just start the process over again. If the goal is just to live in Australia, do they really need the Australia? So this is the kind of thinking that you want to go through. Now, I don't know if this person's in a relationship or not. They're just asking, should it be Canadian? But I would say, what's the value of it? And let me be honest. People think, the Nomad Capitalist, he doesn't want to pay for anything. Listen, there's plenty of people who value a U.S. or Canadian citizenship at $1 million, $5 million, $10 million. I'm sure people for $100 million. Look at all the people in the United States who live in California and pay a boatload every year, live in New York, live in New Jersey. Obviously, the ability to live in the United States and having U.S. citizenship is very valuable to them. So, but, I am saying put a number on it. I think putting a number on things is how the real world works. And so if you're going to have to stay in Canada for a while to, keep paying, then look at that. Obviously, there's also an opportunity cost of what that money would get you. There's an opportunity cost of, other factors. Now, if I'm U.S. and I'm Israeli, if I'm adding Canadian, I would also want to consider, maybe the U.S. and Canadian are somewhat redundant in that if I'm a Canadian citizen, I can come to the U.S. on better terms than any other passport holder in the world. And so depending on what I'm trying to accomplish, I mean, the U.S. to me seems like almost redundant in that situation. So, this is the situation I look at. Now, if you said to me today, Andrew, do you want to move to Canada? Listen, I like Canadians. I think there's some beautiful places in Canada. Obviously, the country has not been that free in the last couple of years. And so I wouldn't go and invest the time from now. Now, listen, I may change my mind in the future. There may come a time when, the country, opens back up, and there may come a time when I no longer care as much about the taxes, or I sell a business and I don't care about the taxes anymore, and I would go and do it. But as of right now, I'm not going in and I'm not willing to pay what it takes to become Canadian. But if I've already done the work, I would claim it. Now, the other thing I would consider when I'm looking at a Western passport is what is the possibility of some kind of restriction being imposed on me in the future? Now, you're already a U.S. citizen in this argument. And so you already are subject to extraterritorial taxation. Presumably you're living in Canada, which even though the countries are so close, there are a number of these tax overlaps which are very inconvenient to deal with for U.S. Canadians or U.S. citizens who live in Canada. And so what I would look at is Canada going to make my life, first of all, again, a lot of Canadians give up U.S. citizenship because the tax systems don't perfectly mesh, and they end up just with really screwy results that aren't very fair. It's not that they're against the United States. It's just like, my life is in Canada, and it's ridiculous. I've got to pay. I'm in the next door neighbor, the best friend country, and I've got this weird, doesn't work together tax systems. But the question is Canada going to go and do that in the future where, okay, now you're Canadian living in some other country, and then Canada's interfering because they have extraterritorial taxation, and now the systems don't work out. So, on the fringe, there are politicians in Canada who want to impose taxes on non-resident citizens. They say, listen, you're a Canadian, you're one of us, why don't you pay like one of us? Well, it takes away the argument that taxes are used to pay for services, people who use them in the country, but that's how these politicians work. They're constantly slithering to the next argument, forgetting the last one when it no longer serves them. So I would ask myself, that question is the one thing to determine, maybe I don't want this. As much as people say, oh, Andrew, he talks about expatriation, I don't want to be a guy who is always like, get this one, okay, get rid of it, get this one, get rid of it. I think it makes sense to get citizenships that you feel good about. And if you like Canada, to me, there's no better reason to have a citizenship, for as much as I'm all about diversification and protecting yourself and plan B, than to feel great. I would love to be able to go back through some of my ancestry and have the citizenship of my ancestors just to feel that connection. But in most cases, I'm too far away, I'm too far back, or, they don't offer it. And so if you like Canada, do it, understand the risks, and say, listen, am I willing to accept it if they do that? If I'm an American, already in his case, and if Canada imposes extraterritorial taxation, I guess you'd have a little bit of fighting between the tax systems, but you probably wouldn't be that much worse off than if you're an American. So these are the things that I would think about. Canadian-Israeli to me is a pretty good combination if I'm planning on living internationally. To me, one of the big reasons to have a Western country citizenship is living in that country. If you have a job, the United States is one of the best places in the world to earn a high wage with relatively low employment taxes. You can get a higher salary than in Europe for that very reason. Canada is somewhat. So these are the kind of factors that I would consider. I would generally take it because I've already put the effort in. Does that mean would I move to Canada and start the process from the beginning right now? No, but if you've started the process and you feel comfortable and you understand the risks that are forthcoming and you like the country, why not take it? Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.